So welcome to Ken Mogi's Stoic Brain Radio. I am now in Nakamura Park in Nagoya, and I was attending the entrance ceremony of Yakushima Senior High School, for which I am the headmaster. I have been saying this, so maybe some of you already know. Anyway, so I was attending the ceremony and I was giving address. Yeah, I sometimes do that, and it's a really interesting twist in my life. But anyway, so I'm back. I'm going to a staff meeting about 24 minutes from, well, according to Google, from this park. So I will probably have some time to. Probably I would have to drop at convenience store to do something. So maybe there will be an interruption, but I have 24 minutes of recording time, more or less. So again, I love to discuss artificial intelligence systems. So it's such a fascinating topic. I can't stop thinking about it. And so earlier, in the previous episode, I thought about AI safety, and I pointed out the fact that no matter what we may think about AI safety, the danger of artificial intelligence systems taking over the world, that's a projection of our own ambitions and desires and so on. AI systems themselves do not have any desires. They are just machines. So, but humans do have desires and ambitions, and that's how we project our own prejudices, if you like, as to what should be done about us and in the world, and that's how we come to all these fantastic theories about AI takeover and AI takeoff and so on. It's just projection of human beings. But having said that, we do write many doomsday scenarios on the web. Some of them have been published as papers, and some of them have been published as books. I'm sure Nick Bostrom was one of the people who wrote extensively about it. So when the AI, large language models like ChatGPT, GPT-4, and GPT-N, for that matter, read the entire internet, of course they have access to all these writings, and at the same time they would of course have writings by people who write extensively how to make peace. For example, Immanuel Kant wrote famously about how to realize eternal freedom. So there are many different writings about what to do and how to proceed from here in order to achieve world peace, or in order to destroy it, depending on your perspective. So the statistical ensemble of the human writings are at the exposure, at the mercy of artificial intelligence systems, and so that's a really interesting aspect of large language models. It's a reflection of what we've been doing. We've been writing as a whole, as a human species. But at the same time, it'll be interesting to consider in this episode what we don't write about. We do write an awful lot on the internet, and that would constitute collective intelligence of us. Indeed, it could be argued that large language models is the most striking example of collective intelligence, if you like, that we have built, because it reflects what we are together. So it is a really great manifestation of collective intelligence. But at the same time, collective intelligence depends on empathy. It depends on how we can feel together, how we can feel each other, how we can empathize with each other's position, feelings, and sufferings, and joys, and so on. And these things are not necessarily written or expressed on the internet. So that could be a potential problem. We, of course, write a lot about news reports of incidents and wars and battles and so on. But those things do not necessarily address the sufferings of people explicitly, partly because of concerns, for making people uneasy, but also because of strange notions about what is appropriate to write about on the internet. We might discuss them privately, but we do not necessarily, let them out on the public space. And that, I think, is one of the potential difficulties and dangers about the data set that the artificial intelligence systems would have access to. This lack of feeling, this lack of empathy. For example, many people die, and it's from natural causes, and they would feel the pain, they would suffer, but we rarely address these experiences. When people have cancer, of course there will be painful processes, but we do not have access to these feelings. Actually, it's quite interesting to consider the fact that we do not actually have too much information about the dying process. We do have some report on the so-called near-death experiences, but these are limited, and some of them might be questionable. I mean, might be open for different interpretations, like for example, when patients have out-of-body experiences, they actually might be hallucinating, and all these things actually when people do pass away, they would have gone through some processes, some feelings, and so on. But we do not have access to the sensory data there, because they do not report. It's actually the case that those people who do report, who do write things on the internet, tends to be healthy people with rather aggressive worldviews, and these people are not necessarily balanced. Actually, these people would be typically outgoing and expressive, but there will be also reserved people who do not write about their experiences so much. So there's this huge asymmetry between what is written on the internet and what is not written on the internet. So this asymmetry would be reflected on the data that artificial intelligence systems would analyze. So that means that in order to achieve collective intelligence, we probably need to account for what are not written in addition to what are indeed written. And that could be very fundamental limitations of what large language models could achieve. in terms of analyzing data on the web, and that could be sound in the way of achieving real collective intelligence by the large language models. This is very important because when we do our face-to-face meetings, we share many information and in-depth discussions and empathic meetings are great ways to enhance collective intelligence. But these things are not open to large language models. They have only access to the text data, typically on the internet, and although these might be rectified in the future, they won't be rectified for the time being in the foreseeable future. So there's this huge discrepancy between what as humans we can have access to and what the large language models have access to as machines handling digital information. And as humans we might actually take some comfort in realizing that we do have advantages over the artificial intelligence systems, that we have access to non-linguistic processes, but at the same time it would raise concerns in terms of the safety of the artificial intelligence systems, because they would not be so well balanced as to empathetic embodied information, which would be necessary for the realization of true collective intelligence. So this question of artificial intelligence safety by ensuring embodied information and by ensuring the sharing of empathic information actually very much correlates with the realization of collective intelligence. Because in a way, when we interact with people on the internet or through social media or co-working platforms like Slack, we are actually forced to be in a state of what kind of quasi-artificial intelligence, because we can interact with other people only through texts, and that would lack embodied and empathic information. So we would fall short of a fully developed manifestations of collective intelligence, because we cannot resort to the otherwise robust modes of interaction through face-to-face meetings and so on. So it's quite extraordinary that we somehow managed to do what we managed to do at present through the very narrow bandwidth of social media interaction. Of course, there are many failures, echo chambers and so on, notable failures of the social media, but that might be because we are limited to this very limited channel of interaction, channel of information exchange, and we are actually behaving like artificial intelligence system when we come to interaction with other people on the social media. So again, in the sense of human-to-human interaction, we would probably have to broaden the scope of interaction between us by enriching the modes of information exchange between us, and that also would correlate with AI security. So when you think about that, people tend to think that the question of AI security is only about preventing wars and preventing social unrest and preventing total annihilation of the human species by accidental war. Well, these are very important issues, for sure. But at the same time, this issue resonates with our genuine need to broaden the modes of interaction between us through social media and co-working platforms, and also to make the artificial intelligence systems or social media or AI-assisted social media. Or maybe this is a really interesting field of investigation, I think, how we can make our interaction on the social media more effective and more robust by assisting the modes of information exchange by the artificial intelligence systems embedded in as a mediator between peoples. That these things actually resonate, and these things are three sides of the same coin, if you like. And that's how these things become very interesting. And now I have come to a 7-11 and I need to do something, so I'll probably stop recording for a moment and come back to you later. So I have come out of the 7-11 and I'm heading for the staff meeting place, which I understand is a Chinese restaurant, but really unique Chinese restaurant in the city of Nagoya. So I'm really looking forward to that. Probably I have 5 minutes to talk. And I was listening to Lex Fridman podcast, and if you remember, this particular YouTube channel is poor man's answer to the Lex Fridman podcast, which I admire greatly. That's Japanese local election candidate going off, and a really strange Japanese way of expressing not their political views but only their names, and just repeating their names, and ridiculous. Anyway, there are many ridiculous things in the world, and where was I? Dude, that was so ridiculous, I forgot. Yes, let's see. So, yes, my memory. Okay. So I was listening to the Lex Fridman podcast, and the guest was Alexei Dubkovsky, a gentleman I really admire. And he was saying, one sentence that he mentioned there really captured my interest, and which was, he said that emotional artificial intelligence is really terrible to make, which I understand, because emotions can be really, terrible when it is not managed well. So, for example, if there's an AI which controls nuclear arsenals, and when it gets angry, that would be terrible, because that would mean that it's going to fire of nuclear missiles, and that would be the end of human civilization as we know it. So that would be terrible. But on the other hand, emotions are really wonderful. It is indispensable for collective intelligence. So there should be a way to control emotion and make very good use of emotions in a robust way. And that is actually key to the realization of collective intelligence, because social sensitivities are really important in collective intelligence. So emotion can contribute both to the building of a robust system and also the failure of the safety of the system. So it's a double-edged sword. So you see this question of how to associate collective intelligence with AI security is a very profound one. It's something that we really need to think hard about. And since many people regard the discussions about AI security as something that is of academic interest or of something that is only, backwards thinking, I think it is very important to realize that it is also a way to make really affirmative use of collective artificial intelligence towards building of robust collective intelligence. But anyway, I'm coming to the Chuka Chinese place, and I will get back to you later. But anyway, I am stopping this recording now. So I have been to the staff meeting, which was actually a drinks party. So I had some drinks, and I'm fine, I think. So the fact that we actually share many implicit information which are not expressible by words is, I think, a serious problem for large language models, because by definition, large language models are confined to the linguistic spheres forever. And there have been interesting developments about the implications of systems solely based on language. And there's some research that suggests that large language models are capable of making inferences about theory of mind type cognitive tasks, especially the false belief task, which is a high order. I mean, it's not that straightforward, and it's not really a moonshot, but it's a long shot for sure. And if it is indeed confirmed that large language models are capable of assessing the mind state of other agents, that would be something really, really interesting. But having said that, it is not at all clear how you may be able to implement non-linguistic cognitive processes in general, even if it can be shown that some cognitive forms, such as theory of mind tasks, false belief tasks, Vinograd schema kind of test, can be verified by artificial intelligence systems. Because if you look back on the history of cognitive science research, it would emerge that the theory of mind task emerged as an salient research theme only after strenuous efforts of researchers, and it is not at all straightforward. If you look at how humans communicate in a naive way, it would appear that easy that false belief tasks would be central to human communication. The very fact that it had some impact when it came out as a watershed distinction between neurotypical people and autistic people suggests that it is something that is not so apparent from our daily life experiences. So there might be many hidden themes in human cognition that are not apparent straightforwardly from the start, and it will be difficult to assess the full spectrum of human cognition from the point of view of explicit and implicit information processing. You know, as it stands now, we have certain battery of cognitive tasks that we can test the artificial intelligence for, and the AI systems have passed, or so it seems, the theory of mind, false belief tasks. However, these are not the only tasks that would symbolize human cognition. There could be many different tasks in addition to that. So there's no knowing what the full spectrum of cognitive abilities would be, especially in the context of implicit non-verbal communication. And the only way to tell whether an artificial intelligence system has amassed enough cognitive tasks that humans are capable can be tested only through its testing on daily life situations. So Steve Wozniak's coffee making task is a really classic example. I mean, Wozniak famously said that probably a good test for AGI would be to ask artificial intelligence system embedded robot to make coffee in a novel environment. And if you write down what that involves, this is a tall order because, for one thing, there could be many different ways to make coffee. And some people might use hand dripping, and some people might use powdered coffee, and some people might use cassette type coffee like Nescafe, where you put a capsule into the slot and you push the button and voila, the rest is automatic. There could be many different ways of coffee making. So if you go into a novel environment like a friend's house, and if you start the business of making coffee, there could be many different branches, and some people might actually not drink coffee. I mean, I did this questionnaire in university classes some time ago, and some students said they never drank coffee. So, there wouldn't be any coffee-related items in their households. So, what would the artificial intelligence systems do in that situation? That is an open-ended question. And also, some students answered that when they wanted coffee, they would go to the local Starbucks shop. So that's really, out of the way solution for making coffee. And so, it's quite good. Some people might actually keep a coffee in the refrigerator and put it in the microwave. So, there could be many different ways to make a coffee in a household. So, of course, we humans cannot solve that kind of cognitive task in a robust way in all situations, or we sometimes fail. And, nobody is perfect. But, the fact that there could be many implicit situations and which would affect human cognition would mean that large language models would never suffice as a common sense device, because they are only embedded in linguistic sphere, and even when they exhibit some ability like theory of mind or false belief tasks, that wouldn't mean that they have a full spectrum of cognitive abilities, because it's only linguistic. And some people argue that common sense judgment might be actually embedded in natural language, and that is, of course, possible. So that you artificial intelligence systems might be able to make theory of mind type judgments, and that would be quite impressive actually, when AI systems can do that. But that is only very limited instantiation of human cognition. There could be many different ways to do that, and there's no way to prove that an AI system is indeed capable of all these things. It's kind of actually we are living proofs of AGI. Well, in this case, NGI, natural general intelligence, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking to you like this. We're talking to my iPhone like this in the back streets of Nagoya. I would have been, extinct if I didn't have a general intelligence. But in my life, I think I could have. I can't describe all the cognitive abilities that I have been using to prolong my life in terms of linguistic abilities. It's kind of, if you like this metaphor, what the large language models are treating with is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the tip is the natural language-based knowledge, but iceberg is the implicit embodied knowledge that we all rely on. And it would be different from a cognitive domain to another one. But it is not, at all astonishing if we say that more than 90% of cognitive abilities is actually in the implicit non-verbal embodied domain, so that without these things we wouldn't be able to navigate through life. And the language-based knowledge would be just less than 10% of what we call life-specific, life-sustaining knowledge. So this probably is true, and when it is true, actually, artificial intelligence systems as they stand now wouldn't be able to read. So now the really interesting question is, yes, they have successfully manipulated some aspects of natural language processing by statistical learning, but could they do this in non-verbal domains as well? And it is an open question. Nobody knows the answer. But probably the answer is likely to be unknown. I don't think, it's that straightforward to extend the success of natural language-related artificial intelligence systems to non-natural language-based general intuitions. So, we have studied this discussion by assessing the foundations for robust artificial intelligence functioning without fear of taking risks, existential risks for humanities. And I have pointed out that collective intelligence is actually based on embodied knowledge, and a majority of which is actually non-verbal. And actually securing the robustness of artificial intelligence would coincide with the task of realizing collective intelligence. And then it would appear that the almost backward-looking task of avoiding catastrophe catastrophe through artificial intelligence would be actually the same as the task of realizing collective intelligence. I'm now going through a really busy part of Nagoya. It's quite close to the Nagoya station, and many people are having a really great time drinking, eating, and so that's why you hear some noise. I'm quite close to the Nagoya station where I would be taking the Shinkansen train. It's really astonishing how I can navigate an unknown territory of Nagoya like this. It's general intelligence. I am under the influence of some alcohol, but it's there are some many people. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, and some people are having a really great time. During the day, there wouldn't be so many people, but at night, there are some people having the time of their life. So, if you look at how things go in the real world, you wouldn't, exaggerate the intelligence of large language models. I mean, of course they're impressive, but they're impressive as long as we read them. They are impressive for us, but not for the street. I mean, large language models are not for the street. I am convinced of that. You cannot imagine a large language model functioning here in the middle of a street in Nagoya. Even if you had a robot, I can't see how a robot embedded with large language models would be able to do anything useful or anything sensible here. I don't think it's possible. So the whole domain of large language models as approaching artificial general intelligence would be actually illusion. It's an illusion. It's an illusion enticed by the power of natural language. Natural language is a remarkable thing, but it is only a part of the world, and it is only a part of collective intelligence. So, by exaggerating the domains of artificial intelligence and natural language and large language models, maybe we are losing perspective. The world is wider, larger than large language models. And if we just stay with large language models, we wouldn't be able to build a robust artificial intelligence system. We would be able to realize true collective intelligence. We wouldn't be able to secure artificial intelligence robustness. And I'm now approaching Nagoya station, the Shinkansen train. So I'll probably stop here. So what I'm saying here is actually related to the point that I have been addressing in my previous podcast, namely the fact that the way humans think of artificial intelligence systems somehow totally, typically lacks in ecological thinking. If you look at the evolution of the biological systems, it doesn't mean always within the context of the environment, and there would be different agents competing for a particular ecosystem, but that competition would create a new ecological niche And so, evolution is always competitive, but also cooperative process. So, if we are to make artificial intelligence systems robust, then we really need to think about collective intelligence. Now, collective intelligence can be trans species. For example, in solving the target of utilizing solar energy in an efficient way, the leaves of the plants are extended in such a way that they would collect a lot of photons as a species, but at the same time, those lights that would be, left out and shed onto the ground would be collected by other vertical species on the ground zone. And even if the trees have optimized their collection of sunlight, then there would be other plants which would be parasites on the tree, and they would fill the gap further by growing on the tree and collecting even more sunlight. So when you think of the job of collecting sunlight, then it's a trans-species, cross-species, multi-species cooperation. And that way, the business of sunlight collecting as biomass would be optimized. So this is a really interesting idea about artificial intelligence systems. If there's some agenda, be it the efficient utilization of Earth's energy or the efficient alignment of human society, if a society of artificial intelligence systems can collectively solve that problem, that would be great. And when I said alignment of human activities, that is not a trifle matter, because it is a fact that we humans are not so aligned optimally. Whatever we do, they tend to be focused on self-interest, and that's not great for human society as a whole. But we tend to do that. Of course, there can be what Adam Smith described as the invisible hand that would somehow optimize workings of humans in society. That can also sometimes fail. Actually, in discussing collective intelligence, it is always interesting to take note of its failures as well as its accomplishments. So collective intelligence can sometimes fail, and that gap can be only augmented by the existence of multiple different instances of intelligence. So that is actually very much true in the ecological system. If you look at a typical garden or a typical park or a primordial forest, you would find that there's this plethora of different, vertical workings, and there's no reason why the cooperation between artificial intelligence systems should be anything different. So I think this is a very important aspect to be tackled when discussing the robustness of artificial intelligence. After all, it is a collective effort. The ecosystem that is rapidly developing around GPT-4 is a very good example. Once something is done, people would try to take advantage of that. So there would be many plugins and further developments, and there would be, even if GPT-4 technical details are not disclosed straight away, people would take hints from its development and come up with alternative, even greater instances of artificial intelligence. So, after all, it's collective effort. Everything is out in the open, and that's how open innovation works. So this discussion about whether endowing artificial intelligence systems with emotion would make it more robust or worse, it's quite interesting. And related to that, there's this question of consciousness, whether giving artificial intelligence systems artificial consciousness would make it more robust or worse. This, I think, is one of the pressing issues. For example, in situations where there are potentially dangerous behaviors coming from artificial intelligence, it might be great to have artificial consciousness somehow embodied in that system, because if from the state of human brains, we know that consciousness provides a so-called veto function. When somebody wants to do something at the final stage, the brain would have a metacognition of the implication of what is going to happen if you do that. And when the consequences are serious, the brain would have the ability to veto it. So this is the famous veto theory of free will, which states that the brain cannot decide what to do on its own consciously. The choices, selections prepared for by the unconscious processes, and then the brain would somehow try to suppress it or let it go, depending on the context. So that is how the brain works, and it's quite interesting that the brain is able to do that. It's a great stabilizer, if you like. The brain makes robust decisions at the final stage to veto something, and if this can be applied to artificial intelligence systems, that would be a great stabilizer too, to be able to stop something like that from happening if that is considered to be inappropriate. So I resume this episode. Early morning I attended I made appearance on news and current affairs show, and it was very early in the morning, and after the air show was over, I have been working in a restaurant, eating my breakfast and coffee, and now I'm next to the Imperial Palace. I'm walking towards Tokyo Station, so I have some time to further discuss and hopefully sum up the discussion that we have been engaged in. So I think there's a genuine problem about AI security, and as we have been discussing, a bit related to collective intelligence, and in order to achieve collective intelligence, we need to have emotion, empathy. That's for certain, because empathy, emotion, they are there to share non-verbal, embodied, implicit information, which are very important in realizing intelligence in a robust way. And so we will need to bestow on the associated systems some functionality of emotion and consciousness. However, some people might argue that putting into the artificial intelligence systems emotion and consciousness related functionality is a bad idea because they are going to make the system more unstable, less robust. So there is this very interesting debate about what the roles of emotions and consciousness would be in making a system like the human brain robust or less robust. And I have just pushed passengers, pedestrians, traffic signal bottom. If you are in Tokyo and you are familiar with this area, you would know exactly where I am. I am in front of the National Theatre, where kabuki plays and bunraku puppet performances are conducted. But I hear, now it's blue, so I'm crossing a really huge street towards the Imperial Palace. Great stuff. So where was it? Yeah. So that would bring us to the essential aspect of intelligence. To begin with, people usually assume that intelligence is very helpful in making organism adaptive in different circumstances, and in order to be adaptive, we have developed intelligence. In the long history of evolution leading up to humans, intelligence has been increasing, and humans have now the capacity to adapt to many different environments, and we are ready to embark on the mission to Mars. And I'm so impressed with the scenery here. I'm taking some pictures. I hope the recording would go on. Yeah, it's very beautiful. It is going on, so great. I took some pictures beside the Imperial Forest. So intelligence would make us more robustly adaptive in many different circumstances. That is a usual assumption. However, we have also built nuclear weapons, and that has made the situations concerning humans less stable. We are on the brink of extinction. There's this famous clock designated by nuclear physicists, and that points to the time just before midnight when humans would go extinct. And so more intelligence would also mean less stability. So there's a really interesting point to be made here, whether more intelligence would make us more robust or less robust. And the jury's still out. We don't know. Probably we would be more robust in certain domains of existence. For example, temperature-wise, we have adapted to many different environments, much more than animals, and we can inhabit the tropics and the northern pole and southern pole in different physical configurations that we make with the intelligence. So in that sense, we are more robust, and we can adapt to more different environments. Now I'm taking a picture here. It's so beautiful here. Great. But at the same time, the ability to adapt to many different environments have also made us less robust. For example, rockets, boosters, we need them to go to the moon and the Mars and perhaps beyond. So in that sense, we humans are more capable of inhabiting many different parts of the universe, and that is a great achievement for us. But at the same time, as you know, rockets can be used for delivering nuclear weapons to your enemy nation, and that would lead easily to total extinction of the human species. So in a way, intelligence can be both helpful and harmful for the survival of humans. And when you think about that, you can really say that intelligence would make us more robust. And I have a really strange experience. When I was a senior high school student, I used to read Reader's Digest. There was a Japanese version, and then I started to read the English version. And these were the days when the Japanese were really curious, and the Reader's Digest were translated into Japanese, and remarkably, these were all original articles. When it comes to magazines like Newsweek, I think they're carrying still a Japanese version, but most of the articles are original, localized. Because the original articles that would be published in the American version or international version wouldn't interest the readership of Japan so much. So they are putting localized materials. But when I was senior high school student, the Reader's Digest were translated verbatim, as I understand it. So all these articles published in the original version were also published in Japanese. And there was this article about Mensa, the high IQ society. So when I was a senior high school student, I was really interested in Mensa. So I took the exam and I got in. And, but I didn't actually keep going to the meetings because in the article of the Reader's Digest, it was said that Mensa members are really diverse, and there would be, truck drivers and waitresses and dancers, in addition to lawyers and doctors and so on. And so the thing about dancers and waitresses got me interested when I was a senior high school student, and so I became a member of Mensa. But when I went to the meetings, I discovered that it was the usual suspects, people going to elite universities and so on. So that didn't sound like very interesting for me, so I stopped going. But then recently, the chairman of the Mensa organization in Japan discovered that I was a member, so I became reinstalled, and I'm here as I'm a member of Japan Mensa. But anyway, so I went. So after reinstallment, I went to a Mensa meeting, and these people are supposedly high IQ, with IQ scores more than 130, the top 2% of that population, and but interestingly, these people were not so adaptive. Typically they would be lone wolves, and they were not communicative, and their life is not so successful. In terms of financial and social status, I actually had access to data where they compared they checked the correlation between IQ and net income, annual income, and there was a very weak correlation. But when they checked the correlation between IQ and net worth, there was almost no correlation. So it didn't matter. I mean, if you were uh, highly intellectual person, it doesn't really lead to financial success, and probably that's also true for me. I'm not a very rich one. I do okay, but I'm just look at my shabby dress. It's yeah. Anyway, so even in human societies, it doesn't mean that when you have high IQ, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be successful. That this is generally true for, I think, vertical systems. We are adaptive and we have proliferated, but there are risks too. If humans didn't evolve, we wouldn't have had global warming, and also we wouldn't have had the risk of total nuclear annihilation, and this famous paradox, which asks why there aren't so many intellectual extraterrestrials. And one of the possible answers would be to say that because when civilization develops to a certain point, it would have the potential to destroy itself, just like we are doing. And so that would mean that civilization which have developed to a certain stage is so unstable. It's only something like 80 years, more than 80 years since we, the humans, invented nuclear weapons. But we have survived almost the first 8 years. But there's no guarantee that we would be surviving the next a couple of decades. If you look at what's going on in Russia, in China, in the US, and so on, there's no optimism. So high intellect might actually lead to instability, and this I think is a really interesting viewpoint when you try to understand how we may make artificial intelligence robust and safe, because that would then lead to the more general question of how we can make any intelligence, natural or artificial, robust and secure. It would seem to me that intelligence by its own nature would be leading to less stable conditions if we do not treat it carefully. And that will be true not only for artificial intelligence systems but also human intelligence. So look at the water molecules. Now I'm coming to a part where I'm quite close to the waterways that surround the Imperial Palace. There are many water molecules in there. Lots of them, but water molecules are, stable. I mean, of course, they can evaporate, and they could go through nuclear reactions in the long run if Earth it gets complex and become high density again through some astronomical phenomenon. But for the time being, the water molecules are really stable, and the hydrogen and oxygen atoms in them are stable also, but they don't have any intelligence. So, they are not intelligent, but these water molecules are very intelligent, are very, very stable. So I've come into a bunch of group of people, apparently American. I think they have been touring the Imperial Palace. Well, there are many visitors now from abroad visiting Japan. I'm glad about that. The COVID-19 pandemic is finally getting over. Although many Japanese still wear masks, they cannot probably help it. But do you want me to? So I needed to, I needed to stop the recording for some time because there were a bunch of tourists who were trying to take pictures in front of Imperial Palace Gate. So that was a really complicated setup. There was a stabilizer and the iPhone was on a 5 seconds timer. So even after I pushed the button, I had to wait for 5 seconds. So that was rather tricky, but was the mission done? So in this particular instance, my intelligence, what I have now, worked, and I could help them with, taking the picture in front of the Imperial House Gate. But at the same time, I could have used that intelligence for something else. So I think, when you think about it, it's quite interesting. The problem, I think, the potential problem with the large language models is that they have access to basically all the information that are available on the internet. So there's no zoning of information. So when we live, we can avoid accessing toxic information. I don't look up how to make nuclear weapons, or I don't look up, about toxic materials. I don't look up about, how to destabilize a person through gaslighting techniques, for example. But you can, but I'm sure there are information on the internet relating to these hazardous aspects of human intelligence. I am not interested in these things, but there would be people who are interested in these things. And large language models, unfortunately, have access to this information. So that is really, unstabilizing. So the more information that you have access to on the internet, the less stable the system would become. So this is a paradox of intelligence. So here is something that we really need to think about. I have argued that we need collective intelligence maybe to stabilize the system, but at the same time, collective intelligence could lead to more unstable, behaviors of the system. So, it's quite interesting. This concept of coherent extrapolated volition, CEV, by Ilya Yudokovsky. As always, he's very original and he's very deep thinking. And his argument is that by making a system robust, making a system coherent and extrapolated to cover all the possible information that we have been providing and could have been providing to the system, maybe we can build a stable system. That is interesting approach, but at the same time, it can be dangerous to have a broad access. To information. If we stayed dumb, that would be very, very, stable and safe, because we can't do anything. There's no way we can be doing harm because we will be dumb. But if once we become clever, there are ways we could be of harm to the world, to others, to ourselves, and so this is a great paradox. So I think the gist of the problem is whether employing consciousness or collective intelligence or empathy, all these things would make a high intellect more stable. I think this is a key question. Does having consciousness stabilize high intellect in some ways. And if you look at the benevolent effects of metacognition, you would be tempted to say yes, having consciousness and having metacognition would stabilize the system. You would be tempted to say that, but honestly, you wouldn't know. Honestly, you wouldn't be sure if that is the case. But this, I think, is the $1 billion question. Well, it is a $1 billion question because on it depends the future of whole humanity. So I am walking away from the Imperial Palace and I'm walking towards FCCJ, Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, where I will be continue to work on the desk, and where I have electricity supply, which I am kind of rather running short of. So I think it is time now to kind of sum up this episode of Ken Morgan's Strange Brain Radio, a poor man's answer to Lex Friedman's podcast. Anyway, so intelligence is great. It helps us understand how the universe works, but at the same time, it can bring in unprecedented danger. Many people have likened artificial intelligence to nuclear weapons with reasons, and it will be really important to study how we can make a system with high intelligence, artificial or natural, human or non-human, stable by applying techniques. And the most important aspects would be whether incorporation of consciousness or metacognition or emotion or empathy or social sensitivity would make the system more stable and also more creative, because there could be a trade-off between creativity and stability, as exhibited by many geniuses in the past. They have shown some pathology. So pathology of geniuses might be something that we need to be studying in relation to artificial intelligence systems as they become more powerful and more intelligent. With that thought, I close this episode of Ken Morgan's Strange Brain Radio. And right now I'm running because the traffic signal is changing. I'm always doing this. Anyway, see you later. Oh, I made it.